Chapter 151. Bai Yanran's arrival. Huo Liancheng looked at Jian Yun. He was thinking about the woman who called herself Sister Jian Yun. That woman said Jian Yun had many men and said she was a whore. He had scolded her when he was angry that night. He had already decided in his heart that Jian Yun could not be a blank piece of paper. She had a boyfriend. Now that she was so open, it was impossible for her to keep her bottom line. Then, since she had experience, why did she still pretend to be pure and innocent? He saw that her expression did not seem to be fake. Or was it that her acting skills were too high, and she relied on this move to make so many men prostrate under her pomegranate dress? Thinking of this, Huo Liancheng suddenly felt annoyed. He did not have a virgin complex. Since he could not find her earlier, he had already accepted the fact that her love experience was not pure. It was just that he did not like her current pretentious appearance, which made him inexplicably annoyed. Jian Yun's face was red. She was still upset about Huo Liancheng's shamelessness. She suddenly felt that the car was too quiet. She could clearly feel the coldness radiating from Huo Liancheng's body. She could not help but glance at him in confusion. What surprised her was that Huo Liancheng, who had an imposing appearance just like an animal in heat, had a gloomy and handsome face. His entire body exuded an aura that prevented strangers from entering. Go to the hospital? Huo Liancheng saw Jian Yun looking at him, and his gaze softened slightly, concealing the sharpness in his eyes. Yes, Jian Yun was very sensitive. She did not know if she had said something wrong and provoked him, so she did not say anything. In her opinion, Huo Liancheng's temper was already a little volatile. In the last second, the wind turned into rain, and in the blink of an eye, a storm had happened more than once, so she did not think too much about it. The two of them walked quietly all the way to the hospital. When Jian Yun was about to get off the car, Huo Liancheng pulled her back. I still need to go to the Mings to settle some matters. Can you go to the Jian could not wait for him to not be there. Huo Liancheng stared at Jian Yun for a few seconds before letting go of her arm. He said, give me a call if you need anything. Okay. Jian Yun opened the door and got out of the car. She waved at Huo Liancheng and walked to the special care building, until Jian Yun could not be seen. Huo Liancheng then looked away. He leaned back in the chair and pinched between his eyebrows. A trace of fatigue appeared on his handsome face. Jian Yun had just entered the building when she heard her phone ring. She picked it up and saw that it was Huo Liancheng calling. Jian Yun could not help but raise her eyebrows in surprise. Didn't they just separated for less than 5 minutes? Could it be that she had left something in his car? Hello? The phone rang 3 times. Jian Yun picked it up, but Huo Liancheng did not say anything. Jian Yun fed him a few more times, but there was still no sound from the other side. Jian Yun guessed that Huo Liancheng had put his phone in his pocket and accidentally pressed her number. So she did not think much and wanted to hang up the phone. At this time, Huo Liancheng's voice sounded from the other side. I'm here. Is something the matter? Jian Yun's intuition told her that Huo Liancheng was in a bad mood. Remember not to be alone with that Bai Zhe. Huo Liancheng only said this, and there was no sound. Jian Yun waited for a while before she realized Huo Liancheng had hung up the phone. What? Don't let her and Bai Zhe go on alone? Bai Zhe was her mother's doctor. If she wanted to know her mother's situation, she had to ask him, okay? Jian Yun was a little angry. She felt that Huo Liancheng was too strict. But then she frowned again. Why did Huo Liancheng say that out of nowhere? Did he think that there was some ambiguous relationship between her and Bai Zhe? He was crazy. While Jian Yun was lost in her thoughts, she suddenly noticed a person standing in front of her. She looked up and saw a handsome face. It was actually Bai Zhe. Director Bai, why are you here? Jian Yun was just thinking about what kind of relationship she and Bai Zhe had with each other when she suddenly saw the person in question appear in front of her. She was shocked. Am I that scary? Bai Zhe could not help but raise his eyebrows and smile when he saw Jian Yun's frightened look. Jian Yun could not help but laugh as well. Why did she have a guilty conscience? They did not have any personal relationships. Bai Zhe looked at Jian Yun, and Jian Yun looked at him. The two of them just stood there staring at each other. The atmosphere suddenly became a little awkward. In the end, it was Bai Zhe who broke the silence. Are you not leaving? Ah? Jian Yun was stunned. She looked around and found that she had been standing at the stairs all this time. She could not help showing a clear look on her face. She pursed her lips in embarrassment and smiled. Director Bai, I was going to look for you. I want to look for you too. Bai Zhe nodded. He and Jian Yun had only known each other for a short time. It was not that they had deep feelings for each other. It was just that when he first saw her, he was attracted by her indifferent temperament. This was the first time he had feelings for a woman. Later on, the more he came into contact with her, the more he liked her. Originally, he wanted to spend more time with Jian Yun through treating her mother and then confess to Jian Yun. Who knew that she actually had a boyfriend long ago? Thinking of this, Bai Zhe regretted not being able to get to know her earlier, especially since he did not know nothing about her. He had heard Jian Yun's name many times in Bai Yanran's mouth. Why couldn't he care at that time? Director Bai, is my mother's surgery time confirmed? Jian Yun saw that Bai Zhe's eyes were getting more and more enthusiastic. She could not help but feel frightened and quickly changed the topic. She did not like it, but she did not like it. Jian Yun would never deliberately let a man who was interested in her be a spare tire. She hated that feeling, so she did not want Bai Zhe to waste time on her. Yes, tomorrow morning's first surgery. Bai Zhe lowered his eyes and covered the disappointment in his eyes. While they were talking, the two of them had already arrived at the doctor's office. Bai Zhe pushed open the door and invited Jian Yun in. There were a few doctors in the office sitting in front of the computer, as if they were writing a medical record. There was also a young woman who was not wearing a white coat sitting with her back facing the door. She was reading a thick medical book on the table. Yanran, look who's here, Bai Zhe called the woman as soon as he entered. Jian Yun was stunned when she heard that. Coincidentally, the woman also turned around. Jian Yun saw that her long hair was tied in a ponytail. She had delicate features and wore black framed glasses. Her nose was pretty and her lips were very light. She gave people a very cold feeling. Who else could it be other than Bai Yanran? Jian Yun, long time no see. Bai Yanran saw Jian Yun and slightly raised the corner of her lips to greet her. Long time no see. Although Jian Yun and Bai Yanran were both students of Boshan No. 1 High School and had also passed the Qing University, she majored in translation while Bai Yanran studied medicine. Usually they would only meet and nod at each other. It seemed that they were not so familiar with her that she specially came to see her. So Jian Yun was sure that Bai Yanran would not appear here for her. Chapter 152, Relationship After Certification. Thinking of this, Jian Yun also looked at Bai Yanran a few more times. She immediately noticed that Bai Yanran's gaze passed her and landed behind her. She even stood up and tightly clenched her hands. Her body was stiff as she leaned forward. She was clearly very nervous, as if she was looking forward to something. Could it be that she was waiting for someone? Bai Zhe saw Bai Yanran's yearning gaze and could not help but sigh in his heart. He turned around and poured Jian Yun a glass of water. He seemed to be inadvertently asking, Jian Yun, why are you alone? Where is little uncle? Thank you. Jian Yun took the glass of water and did not think much about it. She replied, little uncle has something to do. He's out. As soon as Jian Yun finished speaking, she keenly noticed that Bai Yanran's expression of anticipation earlier was gone. It was replaced by a deep sense of loss. She also sat down and lowered her head. She did not say a word. But Jian Yun did not think too much about it. Is he coming back from vacation this time? Will he stay for a month? Bai Zhe asked again, as if he was afraid Jian Yun would misunderstand. He hurriedly added, it has been hard on you all these days. Now that little uncle is with you, it will be much easier. Yes, but I haven't had the time to ask how long he will stay at home this time. Jian Yun drank some water. She also thought about Ouyang Beichen coming over later. She had to ask him if he could stay longer. Jian Yun, your mother was injured. Was it really Lin Lanlan's mother who did it? Bai Yanran could not hide her disappointment, but still asked the question she was concerned about. The Boshan is still investigating. Today the Public Security Bureau said that the suspect has been found. Even if Lin Rong did not do it, it is still related to her. Jian Yun and Bai Yanran were not familiar with each other to begin with. Moreover, there were some things that the Public Security Bureau did not publicize, so she could not say, Jian Yun, I am also at Qinghu. If your mother needs any help, just say it. Bai Yanran nodded thoughtfully. Thank you. Jian Yun lifted her head to look at Bai Yanran. She always felt that Bai Yanran looked very troubled, but there were some things that she should not ask, and she would not meddle in other people's business. Jian Yun asked Bai Zhe some details of Ouyang Fei's morning inspection, and found out that Elson went to the hotel to rest after the morning consultation to check the time difference. She was still a little uneasy. After all, it was the second surgery, and her mother's body was so weak. She did not know if her mother's body, coming out of the doctor's office, Jian Yun went straight. The hospital gave Ouyang Fei 2 nurses. They were both very experienced and very careful. When Jian Yun went in, she saw that it was not the woman in the morning, but another woman in her 30s. She was sitting on a chair by the hospital bed and looking at the IV drip. When she saw Jian Yun come in, she got up and greeted her. She was not surprised. She seemed to know Jian Yun. Jian Yun chatted with her for a while and then sat down. She quietly held Ouyang Fei's skinny hand and stared blankly. The afternoon passed just like that. Around 5:30, Huo Liancheng called. Is little uncle here? Huo Liancheng asked on the phone. Jian Yun looked up at Ouyang Beicheng, who was pushing the door open and walking in. She was surprised that Huo Liancheng knew what was going on. She answered, yes, he just came back. I have a business dinner tonight. I can't go over. You can have dinner yourself. Huo Liancheng was silent for a while and reminded her. Okay, Huo Liancheng said. Jian Yun suddenly did not know what to say next. Huo Liancheng did not say anything. Both of them were holding their phones but kept silent. The atmosphere was really awkward. You? In the silence, the two of them suddenly spoke at the same time. When they discovered that the other person was about to speak, they both shut their mouths at the same time. Once again, there was silence. In the end, it was Huo Liancheng who broke the silence first. Are you coming back tonight? I want to stay here with Mom, okay? Jian Yun bit her lip and asked carefully. Yes, the party might end later. I won't be going tonight. Huo Liancheng's voice was very calm. Okay, Jianyun said, relieved. She had a feeling that her relationship with Huo Liancheng had changed ever since she had gotten the certificate. She could not tell exactly what it was. They did not seem to be as distant as before. His help to her also made her not so resistant to him. I'm hanging up. Huo Liancheng did not seem to have anything else to say. Wait, Jianyun called out anxiously. Huh? Huo Liancheng raised his voice slightly. Don't drink too much tonight, or your stomach will hurt again. Jianyun did not know why she suddenly remembered to say this. When she said it, she realized that this sentence was very meaningful. Her face immediately burned, and she quickly added, Don't misunderstand. I don't want to care about you. I know. On the phone, Huo Liancheng interrupted Jianyun with a smile. Jianyun was stunned. She did not react. She did not say anything. What could he know? Huo Liancheng felt better after a gloomy afternoon. He asked, Is there anything else? Nothing. Bye? Jianyun suddenly felt her heart beat faster. She looked up and saw Ouyang Beicheng sitting on the sofa. He was staring at her. She quickly said goodbye to Huo Liancheng and hung up the phone without waiting for him to reply. Little uncle, why are you looking at me like that? It's so scary. Ouyang Beicheng stared at Jianyun. Jianyun felt guilty. Her hand that was holding the phone was sweating. Ouyang Beicheng pulled the corner of his mouth. Yunduo, do you know what you looked like just now? What? Jianyun asked foolishly. Someone who likes to nag. Ouyang Beicheng said seriously. Jianyun's mouth twitched when she heard him. She pretended not to hear him and walked out of the door. However, the words housekeeper still made her heart ripple. Could it be that Huo Liancheng could smile just now? Was it because her tone was not right? No. She needed to calm down. However, Jianyun had just walked to the door. Before she could put her hand on the door handle, she heard someone knocking on the door. Without thinking, she opened the door and saw Bai Yanran standing in front of her, looking at her nervously. Jianyun could not hide her surprise. At first, she thought Bai Yanran came to look for her, but she was still puzzled in her heart, because she and Bai Yanran did not seem to have any interaction. After graduating for so many years, the number of times they met could be counted with one hand, but Jianyun immediately felt that something was not right. Because when she opened her mouth and was about to ask Bai Yanran what was the matter, she realized that Bai Yanran was not looking at her. Accurately speaking, Bai Yanran's gaze passed her and landed somewhere behind her. Jianyun's heart moved and followed Bai Yanran's gaze to look back. Immediately, she saw Ouyang Beicheng deliberately turn his head away. Jianyun looked at Bai Yanran, whose eyes seemed to be on fire, and then at Ouyang Beicheng, whose back was clearly a little stiff. She blinked and blinked again. It was as if a light suddenly shot into her mind. Chapter 153, The Meaning of Drunkenness is Not in Wine. Jianyun finally understood that Bai Yanran came here because she was drunk and cared about Ouyang Beicheng. Jianyun, can I go in? Bai Yanran saw Jianyun tilt her head and look at her with a blank look. Her face immediately turned red. Of course. Only then did Jianyun realize that she was actually blocking the door and hurriedly moved aside to let Bai Yanran in. Bai Yanran walked straight to Ouyang Beicheng's side. He sat and she stood. Bai Yanran and Jianyun were about the same height. However, even if Ouyang Beicheng sat, he was full of vigor and made her look very petite. Ouyang Beicheng ignored Bai Yanran. His back was straight, and he sat there without moving. His eyes were also looking out the window. Bai Yanran was standing in front of him and staring at his resolute face obsessively. Jianyun saw that the atmosphere was not right and could not help pressing on the position of the sun crystal to think of something to say to ease the awkwardness. You guys? Who knew that just as Jianyun opened her mouth, she saw Ouyang Beicheng suddenly stand up and walk out without saying a word. Bai Yanran hurriedly grabbed his clothes. Ouyang Beicheng did not even turn his head and coldly berated. Let go. Bai Yanran's hand that was grabbing his clothes tightened as if she was enduring something. A few seconds later, she let go of Ouyang Beicheng's clothes. Ouyang Beicheng moved his long legs and was about to reach the door. Bai Yanran looked at his tall and straight back in a daze. The blood on her face slowly faded. She suddenly turned her head and looked at Jianyun. Her eyes were full of pleading, and she mouthed silently, Help me. I beg you. Jianyun was in a difficult position. She was not familiar with Bai Yanran and did not know her well. She did not know much about the matter between Bai Yanran and Ouyang Beicheng. She and Ouyang Beicheng were related by blood. Everything must be on Ouyang Beicheng's side. Then, if Bai Yanran wanted her help now, would she help or not? Little uncle, where are you going? Jianyun finally opened her mouth because she saw that Bai Yanran was about to cry. In her memory, Bai Yanran gave her a cold and arrogant impression. To be able to make such a woman so anxious, it seemed that there must be a story between Bai Yanran and Ouyang Beicheng. Go out and take a breath. Ouyang Beicheng doted on Jianyun very much. Even if he was in a bad mood, he would not ignore Jianyun. I'm hungry. Let's go eat. Jianyun looked at the time. It was almost 6 o'clock. The nurse went to eat in half an hour. She should be back soon. Jianyun knew Ouyang Beicheng's bad temper very well. Now she could only try her best to create opportunities for Bai Yanran to get along with him. Then she would observe them and see what was going on. Liang Beicheng's footsteps paused. He seemed to be hesitating, but he immediately agreed. Jian Yun walked to Bai Yanran, who was still staring blankly at Liang Beicheng. She held her arm and said very naturally, "Yanran, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Let's have a meal together." When Bai Yanran heard this, her eyes suddenly lit up. She pursed her lips and looked at Jian Yun gratefully. Jian Yun smiled. She was very curious now. When she invited Bai Yanran just now, she paid special attention to Liang Beicheng. Sure enough, she found that his large hand that was hanging by his side was tightly clenched. His back also became stiff. Clearly he was somewhat dissatisfied with Jian Yun's decision, but Liang Beicheng did not refuse. "I will go out and smoke a cigarette." After saying that, he opened the door and went out. Jian Yun went to the washroom and came out. Coincidentally, the nurse knocked on the door and came in. Jian Yun saw that Bai Yanran was still in a daze, so she told the nurse a few words and went to Wu Yunfei's bedside to take a look. Only then did she take the bag and went over to pull Bai Yanran. "Let's go." Bai Yanran looked at Jian Yun as if she had something to say, but her mouth stuttered a few times, and she let out a long sigh. She held Jian Yun's hand and softly said, "Jian Yun, thank you. Tell me about your matters when you have the time." Jian Yun did not ask much, and now was not the time to ask. "Okay." Bai Yanran's eyes lit up, and she nodded heavily. When Jian Yun and Bai Yanran came out hand in hand, Wu Yang Beicheng had just smoked half a cigarette. He stood in front of the window on the other side of the corridor. It was just a simple shirt and pants, but his shoulders were wide and his legs were long. He was like Huo Liancheng and was born to wear clothes. Coupled with his handsome looks, although he was not as handsome as Huo Liancheng, he had his own resolute temperament. He just stood there, and it was very eye-catching. Bai Yanran could not look away when she saw Wu Yang Beicheng. That gaze was so hot that Jian Yun could not help but click her tongue when she saw it. She remembered when she was in school. Bai Yanran was a proud goddess and would never pay attention to any boy. However, no matter how passionate Bai Yanran's eyes were, Wu Yang Beicheng did not look at her as if he did not know her. When he saw Jian Yun come out, he extinguished the cigarette in his hand on the rubbish bin and asked, "Where are you going to eat?" "It's near the hospital. Isn't there a family name on the other side? It looks pretty clean." Jian Yun pulled Bai Yanran and deliberately asked her, "Yanran, do you have anything you want to eat?" "I can do it. You guys decide." Bai Yanran lowered her eyes and immediately looked at Jian Yun and smiled. "Then let's go." Wu Yang Beicheng said in a light tone. 10 minutes later, the three of them sat in Shuji's private room. Wu Yang Beicheng and Bai Yanran were silent. Jian Yun was the only one who spoke from time to time. Gradually, Jian Yun also felt that the atmosphere was a little awkward, especially when Bai Yanran kept staring at Wu Yang Beicheng. Wu Yang Beicheng's face turned black. She could not help but sigh, wanting to resolve his stagnation. "Little uncle, when you went back this time, did Grandpa and Grandma ask about Mom?" "I asked. I did not say." Wu Yang Beicheng only showed a gentle expression when he faced Jian Yun. "Mom only had a heart bypass surgery last year. She could not take the excitement." Jian Yun nodded. "That's why I never dared to tell Grandfather and Grandmother." After a pause, she asked again, "Right, little uncle, are you on vacation this time? How long will you stay?" "I only took 10 days off. There's still a competition next month. I have to go back to train." Wu Yang Beicheng took a sip of water and lowered his eyes. "It's only 10 days. Little uncle, you don't have many days at home all year round. Grandma told me last month that if you don't go home and find a wife, she will cut off her relationship with you." Jian Yun pouted in disappointment, but she could see that Bai Yanran was clearly more disappointed than she was. Her small face was disappointed as if she had lost millions of cash. "Nonsense." Wu Yang Beicheng slanted his eyes at Jian Yun. He glanced at Bai Yanran from the corner of his eye, but when he saw her eager eyes, he frowned without a trace. "I am not talking nonsense. Little uncle, when are you going to find me a brother-in-law?" Jian Yun was lying on the table with a smile and a pure look on her face. Jian Yun was deliberately testing Wu Yang Beicheng. She wanted to see how he would react, so she could decide whether she would help Bai Yanran or not. If he did not have any interest in Bai Yanran and Bai Yanran only had unrequited love, she would definitely not interfere. After all, in matters of love, the two of them had to love each other. Chapter 154. I love him very much. When Wu Yang Beicheng heard this, he almost subconsciously glanced at Bai Yanran. Then he flicked his finger on Jian Yun's forehead and said unhappily, "Can I find you a brother-in-law?" Jian Yun turned pale with fright. "Little uncle, are you really bent?" When Bai Yanran heard this, she also became nervous. She looked at Wu Yang Beicheng with eager eyes. The expression on her cold little face was simply too wonderful. Wu Yang Beicheng's eyelids jumped, and his handsome face turned black. He glared at Jian Yun angrily. "Bend your head." "Then you said you wanted to find me a little uncle?" Jian Yun pouted and rolled her eyes. Then she smiled and said, "But finding a brother-in-law is also fine. It is better than you being alone. I do not discriminate against gender. If you really have a man you like, then quickly bring him back to take a look. Don't worry, I will help you with your thoughts at Grandpa and Grandma's side." "Shut up." Wu Yang Beicheng's handsome face was completely dark. He pulled Jianyun over and started to rub her face. Stop. I just made a nose. Don't twist it for me. Jianyun screamed and patted Ouyan Beicheng's hand with all her might. I twisted it, so I can go back to the furnace and remake it. Ouyan Beicheng was not polite at all. Bai Yanran watched the two of them play and looked envious. However, her eyes were filled with loneliness. Little uncle, Yanran is here. Can't you act like an elder? Jianyun's small face was rubbed by Ouyan Beicheng, and her mouth was also pinched into an O shape. But her eyes had always been on Bai Yanran, so naturally, she did not have Bai Yanran's lonely expression at this time. Ouyan Beicheng indeed stopped his hand, but he still did not look at Bai Yanran. At this time, the waiter also came in to serve the dishes. It was the usual 4 dishes and 1 soup. Although the style was simple, the taste was not bad. Little uncle, do you want a drink? Jianyun knew that Ouyan Beicheng had a good tolerance for alcohol. They often drank during meals in the army, so she asked casually. Unexpectedly, Ouyan Beicheng shook his head when he heard her. No, I quit. Jianyun heard that his tone was not right and could not help but look up in surprise. She just happened to see Bai Yanran looking at Ouyan Beicheng with a complicated look in her eyes. It was obvious that she was hiding some secret. Jianyun raised her brows and had a plan in her heart. It seemed that something must have happened between the two of them, and it must be related to wine. Otherwise, Ouyan Beicheng, who had always been calm, would not. No one drank. This meal was especially fast, but Jianyun did not speak, and neither did the two of them. The atmosphere was a little depressing. The 3 of them had their own thoughts and soon finished eating. Ouyan Beicheng made an excuse to smoke and went out. Jianyun looked at Bai Yanran, who was staring at the door in a daze. In the end, she could not resist and asked, Yanran, how long have you known me, little uncle? When Bai Yanran heard Jianyun's voice, she seemed to be frightened, and her body suddenly shook. She turned her head to look at Jianyun and only recovered after a long time. She lowered her head and smiled bitterly. It has been 5 years. This time, Jianyun was shocked. 5 years? How come I don't know? He won't say. He doesn't like me. How could he tell you? Bai Yanran took off her glasses and covered her face. Jianyun thought she was crying, but after a moment she put her hands down. There were no tears on her face, but her eyes seemed to be filled with worry. Bai Yanran's eyes were not big. They were thin and long, and the ends of her eyes were raised. Very beautiful phoenix eyes. When she did not wear glasses, there was a trace of coldness. Under such a pair of eyes, there was an additional trace of charm. Then do you like him? Jianyun asked. Do you? Bai Yanran laughed, as if she was talking to herself. It's more than just like it. I love him. I love him very, very much. How do you guys know each other? Does he really not have any feelings for you? Jianyun looked at Bai Yanran's bitter expression and suddenly thought of herself back then. Her nose could not help but feel sore. For some reason, she wanted to help Bai Yanran. I do not know. I cannot see through him. Bai Yanran's voice was hoarse, but then her eyes lit up again. 5 years ago, I was still studying in graduate school and doing internship in Qinghu First Academy. That day, there was a medical dispute. A male family member rushed over to hit me. It was him who suddenly appeared and saved me. Then I found out that he was injured. Or was it a gunshot wound? It was me who operated on him. Jianyun listened to Bai Yanran narrate the story of her and Ouyan Beicheng's acquaintance. She felt that compared to the plot of the novel, the young and beautiful female doctor was saved by a handsome and masculine soldier. From then on, her heart was secretly in love. He only stayed in the hospital for a day and was taken away. Other than his name, I do not know anything. Bai Yanran continued. 3 months later, G City was flooded. Our hospital set up a medical team to fight against the flood. I saw him again. He led troops to fight against the flood and saved people from the flood. At that time, we started to interact, but 2 weeks later the flood retreated and he left. Later, half a year later, I was kidnapped and locked up in the abandoned house at the top of the mountain for 2 days. At that time, I was so scared and in despair. I really hoped that someone would come and save me. I even swore that whoever came to save me, I would marry him. And Bai Yanran said until here, and she had already fallen into deep memories. Jianyun was also silent. She could not help but think, if it was her, would she be moved by such a man? The answer was naturally affirmative. Thinking of this, Jianyun carefully worded it. So, your relationship with little uncle is just that, you know him? When she said this, Jianyun blinked her eyes. The fire of gossip in her heart had already ignited. How could Bai Yanran not understand what Jianyun meant? Her face showed embarrassment, as if she was reminiscing, but also as if she was yearning. We. However, before Bai Yanran could finish her sentence, the door of the private room was pushed open from the outside. Ouyan Beicheng stood there like an iron tower. He looked at Jianyun expressionlessly. Still not leaving? Are you planning to stay here tonight? Jianyun really wanted to punch Ouyan Beicheng at this moment. Bai Yanran was just about to say the critical moment when she was interrupted by him. Seeing her shy appearance, Jianyun strongly suspected that she had an improper relationship with Ouyan Beicheng. When Bai Yanran saw Ouyan Beicheng suddenly appear, it was as if she was frightened. She lowered her head and her face was as red as cooked spicy crayfish. Jianyun knew that she would not say anything else and could only get up and leave. The three of them returned to Ouyang Fei's ward, but Ouyang Beicheng still did not care about Bai Yanran. He wanted to stay with Jian Yun for the night, but Jian Yun felt that it was inconvenient for him to be here as a grown man. Furthermore, he just came back from the exercise and must be very tired, so she let him go back to Tough Ward. Ouyang Beicheng was worried about Jian Yun. In the end, it was Jian Yun who urged him a few times. Jian Yun saw Bai Yanran staring at Ouyang Beicheng's eyes and could not help but sigh in her heart. Her eyes turned and she pulled Bai Yanran and asked, "Yanran, where? Not far away." Chapter 155, Wife Will Not Drink Too Much. As smart as Bai Yanran was, she immediately understood what Jian Yun meant when she asked this question. She cooperated very well and said, "I live in the Garden District, 2 stops to walk, 15 minutes to walk. I know that it is currently being demolished and it is not peaceful. A few days ago, the news had just been broadcasted and a few rape and murder cases had already occurred there. It is night now, and it is not safe for you to go back alone." Jian Yun deliberately pretended to be deep in thought and then looked at Ouyang Beicheng. She grabbed his hand and said coquettishly, "Little uncle, can you help me send Yanran off?" Bai Yanran also looked at Ouyang Beicheng with anticipation. She was so nervous that her hands were clenched tightly. Ouyang Beicheng frowned and said coldly, "You can take a taxi. The road over there is blocked. Cars cannot enter." Every time Jian Yun came to the hospital, she had to take a bus over there, so she was very familiar with the road conditions. "Jian Yun, don't bother. I can go back myself." Bai Yanran saw that Ouyang Beicheng was still resisting like this, and her face revealed a gloomy expression. She forced a smile, then lifted her hand to look at her watch, smoothed her hair, and turned to walk out of the door. She waved to Jian Yun as she walked. She said, "I'll go first." "Yanran, wait a moment." Jian Yun quickly went over and pulled Bai Yanran back. She ignored Ouyang Beicheng and took out her phone. She said, "I have a friend who lives nearby. I will call him and ask him to come and see you. He is a coach in the gym. Although he is not as good as little uncle, he is not small. Most bad people will run away when they see him." "Forget it, Jian Yun. I will go back by myself." Bai Yanran heard Jian Yun was very serious. She thought it was true and immediately wanted to refuse. Jian Yun desperately blinked at her. She also pretended to look for the number of the so-called fitness coach on her phone and counted in her heart. When she counted to 6, there was still no movement behind. She could only dial a random number. The phone rang twice. She finally heard Ouyang Beicheng's voice. "Let's go." Jian Yun saw a figure flash in front of her. Ouyang Beicheng had already pulled Bai Yanran out of the door and walked very quickly. At this time, the phone also connected. "Hello, Yun." It was Wu Wenjing's voice. Jian Yun looked at the closed door, and her eyes were filled with deep thought. It seemed that little uncle also had feelings for Bai Yanran. Otherwise, he would not have been in such a hurry to take Bai Yanran away when he heard that Jian Yun had asked the fitness coach to send her off. Wait, when her mother was done with the surgery, she had to ask Bai Yanran about everything between her and Ouyang Beicheng. Although Bai Yanran would become her aunt if she married Ouyang Beicheng, Jian Yun would not mind as long as she and Ouyang Beicheng truly loved each other. "Hey, Jian Yun, what are you doing?" Wu Wenjing saw that Jian Yun did not speak for a long time, so she asked. "Oh, it's okay. I made the wrong call." Jian Yun was a little absent-minded. "Sigh, I've been very busy these 2 days. Shibingbing is crazy. Do you know that you let us work overtime until 11 o'clock every day? Are you okay? Is Auntie awake yet?" Wu Wenjing started to talk. "Not yet." Jian Yun did not tell Wu Wenjing and Luo Yanyan about what happened yesterday because she also understood that they had their own lives and could not be affected because of her. So even if Wu Wenjing asked, Jian Yun did not mention about Ouyang Fei's surgery tomorrow. Wu Wenjing thought about it and still could not resist asking. "Jian Yun, the night before yesterday when I saw that you did not come out, I called you." It was President Huo who answered the call. "Yes." Jian Yun thought about what happened the other night and felt a little strange in her heart. "Why are you with him?" Wu Wenjing was very curious. She wanted to call Jian Yun yesterday to ask, but was worried that something happened that night. If she rashly asked, it would make Jian Yun embarrassed. That was why she had been holding back the questions in her heart. "It's a little complicated. I will tell you when I have time." Jian Yun thought of the dispute with Huo Liancheng that night and felt a little unhappy. Although he apologized later, his words still hurt her badly. Perhaps in his heart she had always been such a shameless and lewd woman. Since he hated her, why did he still pester her? Was it really for what he said he wanted from her? Jian Yun was lost in her thoughts. Wu Wenjing could not hear anything over there and fed a few more times before Jian Yun came back to her senses. Wu Wenjing knew Jian Yun did not want to say, so she did not ask. "Right, Jian Yun, I finished this month and plan to resign next month. Didn't you have no money? How are you going to live if you don't work?" Jian Yun asked. "Just because I don't have money, I have to pay my debts. When will I be able to pay my salary? I plan to do business with my friends." Wu Wenjing sighed. She was used to spending large amounts of money and suddenly became short of money. It made her feel very uncomfortable. "Then you have to think carefully." Jian Yun did not persuade her much. Wu Wenjing was an adult and had her own thoughts. She could not control her own thoughts. "Don't worry, I am sure that I am confident. That is why I dared to resign. I also want to try and see if business is good or not. Wu Wenjing said. Jian Yun and Wu Wenjing chatted for a bit more before hanging up. It was past 7 in the evening and the sky was completely dark. The lights in the ward lit up and a nurse came in to make ward rounds. She checked the instrument that connected Ouyang Fei's body and made a record. When it was almost 10 o'clock, Jian Yun asked the nurse to go back. She went to the washroom to wash up and came back to find that her phone was vibrating. The phone was from Huo Liancheng. When Jian Yun picked it up, she inexplicably felt a gah.
What are you doing?
Huo Liancheng's voice was low. His voice was hoarse. I just brushed my teeth. I'm going to sleep. Jian Yun whispered. She heard music over there, so she asked, It's so late. Is the party still going to be over? It's over. I'm at home. Huo Liancheng seemed to have turned off something, and the music was gone. You didn't drink too much, did you? Jian Yun asked in the silence. No, I just drank a cup. My wife doesn't allow me to drink too much, so I don't dare to drink too much. Huo Liancheng's voice was gentle and had a hint of teasing. It was like the ripples caused by flying flowers falling into the water. Jian Yun felt her ears heating up when she heard it. She suddenly did not know what to say. The current atmosphere was too ambiguous. She was not stupid enough to answer his words. Now it seemed like nothing was right. After a long while, Jian Yun finally found her voice. Then, sleep early. Huo Liancheng did not speak. The phone was silent. Jian Yun could hear her heart beating so quietly that she could not help but wonder if Huo Liancheng had fallen asleep. Just as Jian Yun was wondering if she should hang up the phone, Huo Liancheng's voice finally sounded. Okay, let's sleep together. Hearing this, Jian Yun's face immediately turned red. Sleep when you sleep. What did it mean for them to sleep together? Why did he say it so ambiguously? But Jian Yun was not that stupid. She did not argue with Huo Liancheng because of this sentence. She hastily agreed. She hung up the phone.